Let's talk about what is probably overall the most important thing right now, at least in the works in the Senate for the nation, and that's tax reform. It cleared a hurdle last night in the Senate Budget Committee. How are things looking, especially with some of the shakier votes?
Well, this is the first time in almost 31 years that we're doing a tax reform bill, and it's in my committee and out of my committee. And it's an exciting time on tax reform. We still have a few kinks to work out, but I think we'll get there before the end of this week. And one of the biggest challenges with this effort is cutting through the misinformation and some of the nastier identity politics. You know, I might say, as you saw in the last 2 weeks, I took exceptions to a number of comments made by my Democrat colleagues about Republicans just looking out for the rich. That is the biggest pile of BS I've ever seen in my life. Over 4 days of hearings and markups, my Democratic colleagues, most of whom I consider to be close friends, continue to not only malign this particular tax reform effort, but myself and Republicans in general. And by Thursday night, after about 40 hours of hearings, I had enough. That's all I can say.
I mentioned to my listeners that morning, I've observed your career in the Senate since 1976, and I don't think I've ever seen you so ticked off.
Well, it made me mad. I've worked hard to fight for the little guy my entire term of service because I've been a little guy. I was the original little guy. I came from nowhere, worked as a janitor to get through BYU, and I could go on and on, learn a trade as a young man. I'm talking about a skilled trade, and I became a journeyman metal lather. As I said, I come from the lower middle class. I grew up in a shack. I was lucky enough to get a $25 scholarship to BYU, which blew my mind. I thought that's the thing that caused me to choose between my union job and BYU.
Yeah.
$25 scholarship. I was so impressed that they would do that to me. It just came out of the blue. I decided to go to school, which was a life change. And I worked as a janitor at BYU. This country gave me an opportunity. I want our tax system to do the same for others facing those same circumstances. I've always tried to first help those who could not help themselves, but would if they could.
Senator, maybe we could talk about some of the things that are still, to use a term you just used, kind of bugging the Republicans. And for Senator Johnson, it's the pass-through issues for businesses that pass through the tax liability to the owners or the closed shareholders. And then with Senator Corker and others, it's the debt and what will be the triggering mechanism to take care of it if it looks like the debt level will go above certain levels. How is that being addressed with your fellow Republicans?
Well, I worry a lot about the deficit, too. President Reagan didn't call me Mr. Balanced Budget for nothing. We believe that this plan will mostly pay for itself with economic growth and reforms that broaden the tax base by eliminating a number of special interest tax breaks. And when you look at trying to pay down a major deficit like we have here, our two schools of thought, really. One is you can raise taxes, but as we all know, you could raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans up to 100%, and it would barely make a dent. The other school of thought is that we invest in the American people, in the middle class, and in the markets, and trust this wonderful economy to pull itself out of the difficulty that it's in if we structure the economy the way it has a greater tendency to grow, and that's what we're trying to do.